Hey, everybody, I am Chris Dunn, and we are on the Event Marketers Toolbox. Thank you so much for joining. We are building a community of event marketers here, and we welcome folks from every side of the aspect, whether you're corporate events, whether you're festivals, whether you're a practitioner or an executioner, or somebody on the trade show side like myself. So every week at 12 noon Eastern, we roll out a wonderful conversation with people who are kind of in every seat along the way in that event journey. I actually have a new guest host that's joining me. You might recognize him. He was a guest about I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months ago. We've become good friends, and my friend Brendan Hamlin of Hamlin Creative is joining. He's sitting in the guest host seat. So, hey, Brendan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Chris. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. So I run Hamlin Creative, and we're a production company. We focus on live event marketing. So that would be trade shows, that's conferences, that's activations. Really the whole world of experiential, where we create content in those sort of unique moments where a brand and a consumer come together. So it's a special kind of production, but we love it. We love the energy and the opportunities that it affords us.
Hey, that's fantastic. So, thanks for agreeing to sit in. You're going to be a guest host for a few episodes and maybe more. Who knows? Our actual guest here is Alison French, and she's joining us from San Diego today. So, Alison and I recently connected. Actually, I think it's kind of a cool social media type of connection story
Mhm.
because she tuned in. She was checking out the toolbox a number of weeks ago, was commenting. I'll tell you a little bit about our sponsor in a hot second, but she was interested not only in the content of what we were talking about, but also it parlayed into additional relationships. So, Alison, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what
Yeah,
you're doing these
I'm
days?
excited to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I would say my day job hat that I wear is fractional CMO for B2B startups, really
Okay.
more focused kind of in the health tech space, but generally speaking, a lot of SaaS as well. And I have spent my career in marketing. I got into events, first job out of college, marketing coordinator, wearing a lot of hats, and suddenly discovered, oh, wait, I can go be outside. I was in yachting. So our shows were outside on the water in beautiful places. It was little did my 21-year-old self know how lucky I was.
Hmm.
And I could do it all. So I could meet people and interact and chat, and I could set up these exhibits and displays and try to find a way to create pull through and all these things that I had no idea were event marketing. It was merely just, it filled my bucket. I loved it. And from that point on, events have just been part of what I do. And it's just been such an interesting journey. From there, I transitioned into e commerce, which is where I fell in love with revenue because in marketing, normally you're kind of loosely tied to revenue, but not really. In e
Hmm.
commerce, you're driving revenue for the company. There's just no way to avoid it. So early in my career, those like foundational moments in my career was very much focused on how do you make an impact in revenue? What marketing tactics are going to drive revenue? And it just imprinted on me. So when I made the shift to B2B and got into my own company, I'm serial startup. I can't help myself. Really started to find that over time, events were always just this key component of what I would bring to brands. So, children's nutrition company, we were walking events and we were exhibiting and doing everything from small conferences focused on pediatric nutritionists to big shows like Expo West. And so, events have always just been a like kind of steady thread in everything I do, and they've always been my happy place. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, I would say, that kind of post COVID, it's obviously events were hard in those
Yes.
areas. But post COVID, trying to figure out how to generate leads for businesses and recognizing, I think my sweet spot is yes, I'm a marketer. Like I'm a marketer at heart. I consider myself creative, but when you own your own business, you have to get involved in sales. And so it makes you see sales from a very different angle. And so I like to think this intersection of sales and marketing is my sweet spot. And so you're all constantly thinking, how can marketing drive revenue for my clients? And surprise, surprise, campaigns tied to conferences and trade shows and everything we were doing would always go gangbuster. I'm talking C suite of major hospital systems replying to a cold email, nope, sorry, I'm not going to be at AICHE this year, but I would love to connect and learn what you're doing. And you're just like coming from a land of cold marketing previously. You're like, you just got a
Who is this
C-suite
person?
reply? Like, how? And it just kept being this thread I've been following for the past couple of years of how can you use events as kind of the pillar of your account-based marketing strategy, because it's a one time you can connect in person, you can connect sales, you can connect marketing, and create this cohesive campaign that drives revenue. Because back to my whole thing, I find revenue a gamification. Like driving revenue is just really fun. And it wasn't until I led my last startup that I realized MQLs are a joke. Because you'll talk to a salesperson and they'll be like, yeah, marketing says I have all these leads, but it's not turning to revenue because these people don't want to buy. And so it's just a really fun way, I think, to unite both sides of the revenue lens. And you get them in person, you work on the demand generation, and ultimately you can really drive some pretty significant results. It's a blast.
Awesome. Well, that's an excellent description, because that's a nice little foreshadowing of exactly what we're going to talk about today. Before we jump into our official questions and really put Alison's feet to the fire and look for all these great answers, I'm going to talk a little bit about my company, Blue Hive. We are a full service exhibit house. We're very creative. We're both East Coast and West Coast. We're kind of in that mid-size area, about 100 plus people. So we're not so big that you get lost with us, and we're not so small that we can't handle things. We like to think it's a really good size to handle almost every project that's out there. And in addition to Blue Hive, we are also sponsored by a company called Fist Bump. And Fist Bump, coincidentally enough, is the other company that I introduced Alison to. This is an agency that not only initially was helping kind of coach me on how to take my LinkedIn game to the next level, but this was kind of throughout last year. They were really kind of dangling a carrot of like, hey, Chris, starting a podcast would be a really great idea. And of course, the initial, gut reaction from anybody is like, this is too much time. It's a heavy lift. I'm not gonna be able to do this on my own. And they swoop in, they do the heavy lift, they handle all the hard stuff. And I just kind of show up and talk a lot. But what it does is it builds reputation. It builds revenue through reputation because of the content that we're creating, these great conversations that we're having with professionals all over, the spectrum of events, becomes this amazing content. And we use that for marketing. So Fist Bump,
and I'll chime in. Fist Bump is the real deal. I have, in my fractional CMO hat, talked to a lot of companies about podcasts, tried to figure out how to make LinkedIn Live work and all these different components. And what Brandon and his team is creating is unlike anything I've experienced before. And I've spent my entire career vetting agencies and people who say they do this. And it's really blown my mind what he's created. Awesome.
So that would be Brandon Lee, not Brendan Hamlin.
Yeah, different.
Right? I'm totally going to mess that up today, but that's really the best Fist Bump read that we could possibly do, because we literally have a live testimonial happening right in front of our eyes. So pretty awesome stuff. So again, thanks for joining us. That's who's sponsoring us. I'm going to kick it back to Brendan, and he's got a couple of questions we're going to get started with for Alison.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I guess, I love the perspective that you bring to, how you look at events. But I'd like to dig down a little bit deeper and talk about how you really build a strategy that is not just, we're going to make something look great and hope everybody comes to it. And it's not just let's scan a bunch of badges. How do you create that co-creating strategy where the marketing vision can come in, but the sales execution is also very apparent and part of that strategy? How do you work that together?
I think this comes from my last startup was in the account-based marketing space. We were trying to figure out how to productize account-based marketing for med device. And it got really good at finding prospect lists. Like, little did you know that would be something that would be a skill set. But what I came to realize is events is the same way. Yes, events aren't necessarily releasing attendee lists anymore, but you can always create one. You can do it yourself. Is it going to be one-to-one perfect? No. But can you look at your ICP? Can you perhaps layer on a technology or a geographic region? I worked with an eyeglass company that was doing a show in Iowa. And so we did a geography poll for anyone that was an optician or ophthalmologist. Like, it allowed us to still create an audience list to go out to and say, hey, are you attending this regional event? And it gave the sales team a focus and a starting point. So they're not just investing in getting the show, standing there hoping someone walks by. And then, in fact, everyone we pulled for that list is, in fact, his target audience. So it was just like the pillar of his account-based marketing strategy was this event. And it created a really beautiful kind of cyclical experience in all of his outbound efforts to tie and try to drive connections at the event. And so I
It's
think
almost
when
like regardless of whether they were attending that event,
yeah,
I built a conversation or connection
exactly.
with this person who is my ICP anyways.
You got it. You just hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head, Chris. Like, that is literally what I'm trying to convince everyone on is if you come into it thinking it has to be perfect, they have to be in the room, you're going to miss it. But if you're going to come out of it and say, I'm just going to ask if they're attending and I'm just going to try to start a conversation and I'm not trying to sell, I'm not trying to pitch.
Mm.
That's really where the starting point comes from. And then it really just becomes the importance of documentation and making sure everybody's aligned. So you get your list, sales team knows who they're focused on, marketing knows who they're focused on, and then you keep layering your tactics to speak to that audience. As the show goes on, you can do other things. But I think ultimately knowing who your decision makers are that you're trying to drive to your booth, because when I about a year ago really tried to figure out where was I going in this trade show space, how could I better support my customers, and the recurring theme is not being able to talk to decision makers is the sales people's main pain point when they're leaving a show. I stood there, I didn't talk to any decision makers. Number two is the people who came by the booth weren't worth my time. Like, they just wanted swag. And so that was really where I sat down and tried to figure out how can we make this a better experience for people.
Do you find that some of those fundamental things that are part of a trade show need to be reevaluated?
No, I actually am a big fan that everything people are doing at trade shows are already working. Like, a great video engagement strategy is fabulous. You should absolutely have that. And you should be tying that into your matched audience ads. So the same prospect list should be getting those videos. I think motivating with swag, like, what outcome are you trying to create from your prospects? Like, do you want them to book a demo? Do you want to just stop by and have a conversation? Like, I think the toolkit people have is great. I just think if you're going to show up with a toolkit and hope a decision maker walks by your booth, that is a really expensive gamble. And you don't have to gamble. Like, you can try and do some things that increase the likelihood of a positive outcome.
It's really about taking that, like building the conversation, and the event is just the midpoint of that conversation.
Completely. And then it's cool because if you go into it with a plan, here's the list, here's the people who are talking, your follow-up, sorry, I missed you. I didn't have time to connect. It's much more authentic. It's all anchored on something that's real. Your subject lines can be like, see you in San Diego. Like, it's just real and authentic. And it just allows the whole organization to speak to people as humans and start relationships. But it only works if you know your ICP, if you're laser focused, if your team is willing to commit on both sides to, hey, we're investing our dollars around this audience. But if everybody comes together with that focus, it makes a big impact.
Yeah, that's great.
That's good stuff, and that's a fantastic segue for my question. So I'm going to start with, and I stole this from Alison. I'm going to give you credit, but execution is really freaking hard.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we help our people do this? How do we pull it all together? Right. You just kind of laid out a lot of great things from a playbook on the things that we need to do, but kind of let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. You talked a little bit about the ICPs, but aligning on outreach, the ads, the CTAs, and kind of
how do you actually make it happen
around this whole thing? Yeah,
I think some of it starts with leadership and having a realistic expectation of what you can put on your people, because sometimes I'm finding to do trade shows right requires an entire different tech stack that you may or may not have access to. An entire different skill set that might not be part of your normal day job. And so I think it's important for leadership to equip their team with what they need to be successful, or have realistic expectations of what they can accomplish with what you've given them. So I would say starting there is probably the first step in execution, is realistic on what do we have to work with from a budget perspective, a team perspective, a tech stack perspective. And then I think the reason execution gets hard is everybody has day jobs. I think in larger companies, we're lucky to have an event marketer who can kind of take the lead and wrap their arms around the event. But in a lot of the startups I worked at, I was VP of sales and marketing, but I'm also wearing like financial forecasting and supply chain hats because we were a lean team. Like my ability to do a complete, perfectly executed outbound campaign was minimal because I was spread so thin. But we knew we had to be at Expo West. It was what the brand needed to do. And so it was just this weird push-pull situation. So I think that's usually where execution falls short, is people are slammed in their day jobs, trying to figure out when to squeeze it in. They can never quite pull it off. And so they just show up because they have those 3 or 4 days on their calendar. And then the same thing happens on the backside. They get home, they've got 4 days of work piled up, best intentions, and it just gets lost in the shuffle. And I think that's where that stat of like only 20% of leads are followed up on. And I believe it because I've seen it happen time and time again with my clients. Or the one obligatory, we send an email thanking them and then nothing else happens because some deal is, I think in sales, you're chasing revenue. So it's like, what's the hottest deal? You go after that and everything else just kind of falls out. So I think that's where the other side of the plan is making sure there's an accountability lens on what are we doing before show, what are we doing on the floor, and what are we doing after the show, and being really realistic about what can we accomplish with the tools and the resources we have available.
Yeah. I just kind of want to circle back, and you kind of ended up with that. But one of the things you mentioned is from a leadership standpoint is like understand who we're sending, to the show. And it's not automatically just like, we're going to send sales because we're looking to make sales, right? You have to kind of look at the entire team, examine their skill sets. Are they introverted, extroverted? Are they technical?
Yep.
Do they have the gift of gab or whatever it is, right? We've talked a lot on the show about making sure that people are, investing in training for their booth staff. But over and above that, there's also just understanding what the skill sets and strengths are of the team. So as somebody who planned shows and kind of went as a revenue leader to those shows with certain expectations, did you look at the stable of people that you had available and handpick them? Or
No.
like, what does that look like from your end as a CMO, as an acting revenue chief?
Absolutely. I would say I've lived both sides of it, where lean team, we just have to show up with what we have, to picking the person that can show well. And I don't know a more polite way to say that, but someone who is not going to show up in a hoodie sweatshirt looking sloppy. Like there's sometimes people are just a little bit more polished and they have that persona that represents the brand well. It's really hard to do as companies are scaling, but you can't beat the founder. You cannot be a founder walking around talking. You can't get that energy, but sometimes it's hard. So then you have to look at who can best represent that company with that same kind of energy and pulse. We actually set it up at one of my past organizations where we had one entire person that's all they did. They focused on events and then they would bounce the leads to the rest of the team to take it because he really had that gift of showing up and showing well.
Brand ambassador, right? Kind of.
Yeah, completely.
That's the hat. Wear that hat. Absolutely. All right, Brendan, back to you to take us to the next step.
Yeah. So I think there's the notion between somebody being busy and somebody being focused. And there are different strategies and different methods and ways that somebody can be more focused. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how you go into a show focused so that you're coming out of it with substantive results.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really like to have kind of a twofold approach to this. Is one, each rep is assigned key accounts that they need to speak with. And so in some situations, because I'm in SaaS, a lot of times you're exhibiting and the people in that exhibit hall are your prospective customers. So I'd say services, SaaS, like it's a beautiful situation. So yes, you could just stand at your booth and hope one of those brands come by. Or you could take a look at the exhibitor list ahead of time and get pretty strategic and say, here's who's calling on what booths. And even if it's just a conversation starter, if you can make that first touch as a human, you're going to get better results long term. And so really ensuring that the sales team has a plan for that. So Who are they targeting? How many accounts can they realistically call on in a day? I think that can be a little hard. I think sometimes people go to a show and they're walking a show is like, what are you, a tab? Yeah. Not looked upon friendly, but I think the reality is a lot of sales teams are doing it. They're sending people to walk a show. They cannot cover 5,000 exhibits in 2 days. So who are you focused on, whether you're exhibiting or you're walking a show, and then holding them accountable? Because that's where I think the real magic has come in for my clients is you went to talk to 40 people. How many of those 40 did you talk to? Tell me about it. Did you meet them? Did they not meet them? Did they pass you to somebody else? What's the opportunity potential based on that conversation? And then how many other people were you able to bump into? Because usually you can get the extra 5 or 10. But if you know that, hey, they went for 40 and guess what? They were too busy chatting at the bar. They didn't connect with any of them. Then at least from a sales leadership perspective, you have that accountability to say, okay, you're not going to any more shows. Like you're not meeting your goals.
Taking away your travel card.
Yeah, exactly.
That goes back to Chris deciding who's going.
Yeah. And it's just
Right.
keeping people accountable.
People,
and and knowing what your actually outcome is you're trying to work towards, it gets a lot easier. But if you're prepared and you go in with a plan, it's a heck of a lot easier. If you have the profile picture of the person you're trying to walk up to at a booth, it is, I am marketer first, sales by default. So I still get nervous. Like I still get cringy at times walking up. But if I know who I'm looking for, it avoids that awkward, can I talk to the person in charge of purchasing? I can ask for him by name, or if I recognize the face, I can grab him and be like, oh, hey, I sent you an email last week. I just wanted to come by and say hello in person. So that instant worry or like flush that people get about doing it is gone because you've done your research. Your research could then go into, that their CEO was speaking at an event. So you mentioned like, hey, I saw your CEO speak yesterday. And so if you've done your pre-show research and you don't just have your list of accounts, you actually have those connections. Are you connected to someone mutually on LinkedIn? Like your friend used to work with him. And there's ways to triangulate this data now with AI. It's pretty easy. I say it's easy. It's because we do, but like, there's ways to pull this all together where all of a sudden you can make your reps so much more powerful when they're on the floor, that they're not just walking up and saying, hi, do you do so-and-so? Who should I talk to? Which is what most people are doing.
Right,
So those are the other parts I think about going with the plan and being prepared. It's like, it's not just who do you want to talk to? It's like, do you have that opener that's going to make a real conversation? So afterwards, when you follow up, you're not just Joe Blow who just looked like a dumbass trying to have a conversation with someone that they never knew.
Well, in our world, and I think it translates over. It's that storytelling component, So how many cold emails do you discard? If you haven't done your homework or you don't know who you're talking to or how to get to them, then you're a cold email walking up,
Exactly.
And so being able to tell that story to at least know something about that person creates a completely different experience and probably a much more productive one.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm going to get a business card, Joe Blow, General Dumbass.
Yes, right?
Yes.
It is.
Stand that off.
And it's so hard because I think the reality is we all know it's a problem. I can't think of a CMO I haven't spoke to who says, yeah, we go to these shows and I cannot tell you if that $100,000 was actually worth something or not. Like it is a known problem in the industry, but it's a hard problem to solve. And so I think getting into the accountability and the transparency is a nice way to give leadership some measures to try to drive it forward.
And I love kind of the tactical aspects that you've actually given us, right? Because it's not just like, hey, Jim, here's your 40 leads that you're going to go attempt to have conversations. It's the idea of like, okay, first I research, I do the cold outreach, the call, the email, whatnot. So even if I walk in and I haven't spoken to him yet, hopefully he recognizes my name because I've made a couple efforts to contact him.
Yep.
And then this, there's a process there. And it's just not just throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks.
And it's like Jeb Blunt says in his fanatical prospecting, it takes 40 interactions with a prospect before they're even like familiar enough with you to want to even reply to an email. And so that's when I think like video gets so powerful because you can run matched audience ads. So you can take your entire prospect list, start serving them ads before the show, during the show, et cetera. So if you're good with your video content and you're creative and you're putting faces to the people who are walking up, like you create this synergy where they're just more familiar with you and you're like teeing your reps up for a better outcome because you've aligned your marketing efforts all towards the same goal. And it's, what is that goal? Like, are we looking for book demos? Are we looking for conversations? Are we looking for people to attend an event? Like, whatever goal you're working towards, if you can use all the channels you have available to help support the reps to drive that ultimate outcome of revenue, it makes everyone's jobs easier. You're going to spend less money because everybody's aligned. You're going to drive better outcomes because everybody's aligned. I think it's just a really wonderful way. And it just gets into the execution. Like, how do you get everybody together to make sure you pull it off from all the different channels and the different angles? Especially with, I think a lot of organizations have different agencies and different people pulling the levers. That gets a bit tricky, but it's doable.
You mentioned video. This guy over here, he's got a little experience in that aspect. So I know you guys, we were chatting in the green room ahead of time, and this was a place that I certainly wanted to camp because I thought it would be really interesting. So Brendan, you've got some examples of things that you guys have done that kind of you've seen really kind of move the needle, as well as Alison. So Brendan, tell us a little bit about the project you were telling us earlier, the Best American or Greatest American Bartender or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's called World Class. And
World Class.
It's a bartender competition.
Okay.
And this goes back to, this feeds into the notion of the strategy of before, during, and after. So our process is that we're creating promos before the event happens. Then me and my team are on site during the competition, filming everything that's happening on site for 3 days and producing content inside the event that goes out to social media every single day. And then afterwards, we're doing recaps that talk about who the winner was, and then also promoting next year's event with Apply Now. So get involved. And we have seen a 40% increase in people committing and participating to join. It's an industry audience, but still, that's a huge increase in the number of people. And it just shows that kind of a strategy does work when it's focused, when you put the effort into it, when you carve out the time and the importance of it, that it delivers.
Just out of curiosity, obviously you guys are a creative agency of sorts where you have a specialty, but did you guys kind of piggyback on to this organization that's hosting the competition? And did you come to the table and say, here's the playbook that we think will work, and we're going to produce these things for you? Or was there like more of a traditional marketing agency or ad agency that was involved in the middle that basically hired you guys to do the hard production work, and then kind of, let's roll the playbook out? Here are the videos. We're going to drip them out. We're going to send them out during the show. Like, what was what were the different kind of teams and lanes that everybody kind of had on that?
Sure. So there is an agency involved. There's the client, and then there's the agency involved, and then we're one of their video partners. And so, but this has evolved over. This is our 5th year doing this, and so it's evolved over time where we look at it each year. We're like, what can we do better? How can we push out better content? What, all the tech that we're going to bring to it, the angles we're going to shoot, and that kind of thing. But the process, this arc of content and this before, during, and after is something that we developed together and really came and said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like, let's make sure people are there. Let's show them what's happening while it's going on. And then let's tell them what happened afterwards. And not just a sizzle reel, but this is substantive, real, excitement about the event and everything, showing who won. And then also, a call to action to get people to apply for the next year. And it's worked. And it starts out nationally, so they're in regions, and then they whittle it down, and then there's the top people are the ones that this year it's in Atlanta, and so it's a really fun event. But yeah, it's been a strategy that sort of evolved over the years.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, Alison, you also had a couple examples of people that you've seen do a great job, and maybe some other folks who didn't do a great job. We don't have to call them by name, but
no, absolutely.
Winners and losers.
I think it's interesting. So a client I'd worked with had the more traditional approach of like, okay, we're going to show up at a booth at a conference and in the healthcare space, and maybe a little occasional pre-show email here or there from one sales rep to the people, but nothing focused. They do a lot of dinners and drive connections that way, but nothing really focused on like demo setting. and getting activation. So typically they'd walk away from a show with maybe 5 to 10 leads. Then they'd have to work to convert those leads to a demo. So we really came in to focus on what is the outcome that would make this show a success from an ROI perspective. And we set the goal of 20 book demos by the time the show's over. So if we can eliminate the step of going from lead to demo, if we can make the demo happen on the show floor, that's going to create a better outcome for the organization. And so ultimately, by kind of integrating everything, so there is a video component on the show floor, their video dashboard or video billboard, I should say. Plus, we are serving those ads on social media, getting the founders to be posting and on the brand and everyone on the show floor. So you're really creating that surround sound experience for the targets we're going after. And ultimately, they're able to walk away with 29 book demos. So they're targeting, I think, around 40 accounts going into it. So it's a pretty great thing, but it's compared to previous years, it was like a 500% increase on outcomes. And it was simply by going in with it. Everyone had the same plan. So the team was trained on, this is what we're focused on. We're focused on booking demos. We had everyone driving the demo bookings to a QR code so we could pixel them for retargeting and other ads. There was just a lot of tactics that everybody was focused on the same thing. It wasn't, oh, I'll grab your business card and set up an appointment. Everybody knew, here's a QR code, here's a landing page you're using on the website, here's how we're trying to drive these outcomes. We also recognize you have to motivate people's behaviors. Everybody is busy. When you're exhibiting at a conference and people are there, the attendees are there to learn, getting them to come to your booth, you have to motivate their behavior. And that depends on the audience. Do fish bowls work? I've never seen it, maybe business card fish bowls, but what does work consistently across the board is a pair of AirPods. And when you're targeting surgeons who make quite a good living and you can still get them to come by your booth for a free pair of AirPods, like there's something about the perceived value of the giveaway to their time and energy. And so you just have to figure out what that is for your specific audience. And we broke it down to a cost per lead analysis in the sense that what would you spend on paid media? What would you spend in the other channels to try to acquire this lead? Can we just do some cold outbound and use this consistent message that anyone comes by the booth and books a demo during the show is going to get a free pair of AirPods handed to them? You know, they literally had to go to the website via QR code, complete the calendar, and then they get handed a pair of AirPods. We didn't have problems with no-show rates. Everyone still came. Like there was all the potential issues we worried about, but ultimately we got 29 of our exact laser-focused ICP to come by the booth and take the action to get on that demo with us. And it was just overarching a great campaign. And the same thing we talked about earlier, that's the focus. Like that is the audience that we're going after year round. So you've started that conversation, even if they might not close now. You met them, you've had the friendly interaction, they've had the demo, and now it's just about nurturing them until they're ready to make that purchase decision.
All right, let me jump in here with a clarification question, or just kind of take this a little bit deeper. So I'm glad you mentioned kind of, an investment on our end in the trade show world. We all understand that doing shows properly is very expensive, but the difference between doing them properly and doing them poorly, that's where the results tend to, obviously show themselves, right? So what you just described, a company that was going to shows and they were having meh results because they were putting in meh efforts, was spending X.
Yep.
To do what you talked about, new strategy, much more focused, laser focused, ICP, going after these people. We had a plan. We had high quality giveaways. Do you have any visibility into what the previous spend was versus the spend that they ended up with to execute, let's call it
the extra lift? It wasn't that significant, to be honest. I mean,
it wasn't like 3 or 4.
The video billboard the video billboard was an expensive investment. Don't get me wrong. But even if we would have taken that out of it, every other component of that strategy would have just been a shift in marketing dollars to go after that audience anyways. But it was that we slowed down, we took the time, and we got everyone aligned on the same goal, I think is really, really key. And then, I mean, obviously they didn't have me the year before. And I come with a price. So like, I can't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't
but
that.
But if you're going to spend $200,000 and get crappy results, or you want to spend,
I'm going to say like a 10% increase,
or whatever,
20%
and
increase,
get amazing results.
Yeah, not significant in the grand.
And maybe that's 1.5x, but maybe it's not even maybe it's not even near that, right? So
No.
yeah, the real cost of not doing it well is coming home with maybe 5 meh leads versus
Yeah,
29 highly qualified, already gone through the demo.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
Exactly.
if I could just add
game
on
changer.
to that, when it
Please.
comes to our world, so many times they look at a video production company as like just an expense that's too much, too far, not, too much to
Mm,
deal with. And it can be, and I understand that. But then you still have somebody that pulls out their phone and just takes one picture of the booth or whatever, and then that becomes your post-event post,
yeah.
which I don't think is good enough. And so
Right.
if you are only going to have somebody on your team do that, then you should designate somebody to do that. It's not, don't add that onto somebody else's plate. Like, bring somebody in that has that as their job. Or if they're going to interview everybody with their phone, that's fine. Do that with your phone, but have somebody dedicated to that, because I think that the results that you get out of that when you have somebody focused in that area can be really, really meaningful. Even if you don't bring a company like us in to do it professionally, at least designate somebody to handle that, because it can really matter. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a big added expense,
No,
but
we
it's that
actually,
strategy that you're
yeah,
talking about, Allison, that's so important.
we walked a show, myself and a salesperson, and had a member of the team who was really savvy with social media. And we would team chat. We had a thread on Teams, and we'd team chat her videos, interactions. And she was just like it was as though she was in the room with us and posting and tagging and getting, and then the brands would reshare our post. It was just this beautiful synergy
Yeah.
of pulling all the resources together to be focused on, we've made this investment to travel here and be here. How do we get as much out of it as possible? And it
Mm,
was great because she could edit the videos, and it just made it that wee bit more polished,
Right.
even though we didn't have a budget for a production company to join us.
right.
If you take the time to slow down, I think people can really, and give them the tools they need to capture the information and be successful, it can go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree.
Go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
There we go. So, I mean, and Brendan, just to kind of bring this back home and circle the wagon and tie it together with, Tyson, who's on our team here at Blue
Yeah.
Hive. He's our kind of digital guru. He's he's an everything guy, right? He's video and he's content creation and interactive and so forth. And we also do shows. We eat our own dog food. We go out and show ourselves at shows. This past year, he had a prior obligation. He could not join us. And we did have myself and Dana, who joins me here often, and we took some videos. And there was a plan, but it was not the same. Like when Tyson goes to the show and he's the guy capturing the content, he's got the eye. He knows what he's looking for.
Mhm.
It's his work, and the output, at the end of the day, of what we were able to create and put together was that much better. So
Yeah.
in some instances, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but to know that going in and say, and I agree, like it doesn't have to be a huge spend on the production group if you don't have the budget there, but assign that task to somebody who's capable.
Yes.
Have them do a little bit of research and map out some things. Get a couple of inexpensive little microphones that people can do interviews with, and the sound is better. Just
Yep.
little stuff like that just can become a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. It all helps a lot.
Absolutely. So, hey, listen, here on the Toolbox, we aim to come in at around 35 to 40 minutes, and we're kind of right in that ballpark here. So we're going to start the wrap-up process. Allison, this has been
Yeah.
tremendous. I appreciate you coming on board. You've shared some amazing information in a very short period of time, so thank you so much. But you're not off the hook yet, because we like to end the show here with, hey, can you leave our audience with like 3 real little nuggets or takeaways that are maybe game changers? All of the things that
Yeah.
you've talked about, boil it down, or maybe introduce something new
Yeah.
that people can use as a takeaway.
Yep. So as I said, go in with a list. You need
Mm.
to go, you can hope for badge scans. That can be absolutely part of your strategy, is who's going to come by the booth, but go into the show with a list of people you're targeting to drive demand to your booth.
Right.
Then make sure the people on the floor have that list, whether it's a journal, or I have an app I've created called ShowScout. It's really like an in-person CRM that keeps everybody laser focused on exactly
Okay.
who you're supposed to be talking to at that show. And then find a way to capture the conversations and create that feedback loop for your post-show automations, in the sense that your follow-up should be built out in your CRM before you even get to the show. So you should have a template created for who your hot leads are and warm and everybody else and those you forgot to meet, or those you weren't able to meet with. Have that already ready in your CRM. Then use your notes, or in my app called the ShowScout app, you can rate opportunity potential, who you met. Use those as triggers. So when you import the data into your CRM, it all just goes out and you don't have to think about it. And you don't have to chase your sales rep down and say, who did you talk to? Or did you end up meeting this person? Tell me more. Tell me about the conversation. You can pull the notes in and customize it with AI. There's so many things you can do if you're equipped with the right tools. Just get the automation ready for the follow-up before the show. And then make sure you have a feedback loop in place with your team that's on the floor. That's more than just badge scans, because badge scans are hard. Depending on the show, you don't know what day it's coming. You don't necessarily remember what the conversation was. Like, find a way to have your post-show follow-up be triggered by the actual activity that's happening. And then you just don't have to worry about it, because there's nothing worse than going and dropping a couple $100,000 on an event to only find out 4 weeks later your team hasn't followed up with anybody. So plan for the fact that they're not going to follow up and give them, and make it as easy as possible. I mean, literally, ShowScout was created because sales team ghosted me on the floor, and we had this very intricate multi-channel campaign that was meant to deploy at certain hours of the show. And I didn't know what was happening on the floor because they were busy selling. They weren't telling marketing what was going on. And so it was simply the first iteration of this tool was just press this button and tell me if you met them. So we knew to not look like idiots, because that's my big thing in marketing, is never step on salespeople's toes with their prospects or customers. And so you don't want to be the idiot that sends out an automation that falls flat because it's wrong. So you need that feedback loop. And then if you've got that feedback loop, everything else can be seamless.
So simple, and yet so true.
It's
And
so
we see it all
hard.
the
I mean,
time.
I literally had to build a tool to solve this problem because
You're fixing it, right? You've identified the issue, and you're solving your own, not your own problem, but a major problem. So obviously people are going to want to know, how do I get a hold of Alison French? Because, man, I need her help. So how do people reach you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I think it is French Alison. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yep, it's French Alison
right there. Thank you,
on LinkedIn. And my company's website is joinlto.com. So I am a fractional CMO for B2B startups. And then I also have kind of a productized service business to help brands do a better job turning trade shows into revenue.
Fantastic. Well, this has been spot on. What a great conversation. I know a lot of folks who are tuning in, whether they've seen it live or if they'll catch it later on all of the different channels. You can watch this live after the fact. It also will post to YouTube. It'll also be on your favorite podcast channel, Spotify, Apple, whatever it is. So thank you so much for joining us. Brendan, fantastic job sitting in the big seat over there. Thanks for backing me up. That was pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Alison, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy that you were able to swoop in and save us.
This was great.
Initially, again, we connected really recently. We were going to have her on as a guest in the summertime, and someone else fell through. So she swooped in,
it's my honor.
saved the day. And
talk this stuff all day long. It's my,
so good.
Talking about marketing is my happy place.
You brought we can see the passion.
Yeah, I love it. I
So you brought the goods.
I sincerely love it.
We thank you so much. So
I appreciate it, guys.
Everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us here in the Toolbox, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Cheers.